Hello and welcome to part 2 of Flex Your Vote 2024. My name is Sonia Chalaka and I will be breaking down in this video Proposition 34. Now, Proposition 34 from our 2024 California ballot seeks to restrict the ways in which certain healthcare entities can spend their prescription drug revenues. This proposition has several moving pieces. There's this contextual federal drug discount program, the regulatory body in California that is charged with oversight for this particular proposition, and of course, all these threshold inquiries that would dictate which healthcare entities are subject to this proposition and what penalties could be levied against them for non-compliance. So let's start with this federal drug discount program. Under a federal program, drug manufacturers are required to provide discounted prescription drugs to certain hospitals, clinics, and providers. These, and we'll call them healthcare entities as a whole, are typically public or private nonprofits that namely serve low-income individuals. So invariably, every state has these type of healthcare entities, but this proposition would focus on how healthcare entities meeting this threshold in California must spend their revenues from these prescription drug discounts that they are privileged to under this program. Typically, these nonprofit organizations are also tax exempt, so they're not spending any tax in their normal operation of business. As you can imagine, this discount program, while it serves many benefits, does allow these healthcare entities to gain quite a revenue from these prescription drugs because they're receiving them at a discounted price from manufacturers, but then they effectively price gouge. So the consumer is paying well over the discounted price. Or perhaps if they're making these drugs available to the government is being overcharged through their Medi-Cal program. Now, certain healthcare entities would thus be subject to regulation by the Department of Managed Healthcare. The Department of Managed Healthcare is the state agency that I previously worked for in their litigation team that is charged with oversight of all the healthcare entities, or most of the healthcare entities that are licensed in the state of California. So they would be charged with assessing compliance under this proposition. Now, which healthcare entities would be subject to this proposition and what is being asked of them? Well, healthcare entities would need to meet 4 very specific criteria to be subject to the provisions of Proposition 34. First and foremost, they must be participating actively in this federal drug discount program. Second, are licensed in the state of California, are actively licensed. Third, that they are entities who have over at least a 10-year period expended at least $100 million in revenue on services other than direct patient care. And the fourth condition triggering compliance under Proposition 34 is that these healthcare entities either previously or currently operate family property units and have a certain number of citations, and all of these citations are of a severe metric. So entities that have been subject to past citations, and typically these citations are on the severe side and in need of corrective action. Okay, so if a healthcare entity meets these 4 criteria, then they would be required to spend at least 98% of their prescription drug revenue on direct patient care and direct patient services. However, If a healthcare entity fails to do so, they would be subject to 4 specific penalties. Either all 4 if the situation warrants it, or perhaps one or a few of these 4 specific penalties. The first is they would lose their tax-exempt status in the state of California. As we shared, many of these healthcare entities are tax exempt and thus are not paying active taxes on their business operations. Second, they could lose their licensure status in the state of California and thus would no longer be able to operate as a healthcare entity in California. Third, they could be prohibited from future state or federal programs and grants to benefit their healthcare entity, their programming, their revenue, and their ability to serve patients, etc. They would not reap the benefits of certain government programs. And fourth, these healthcare entities and their primary officials would no longer be eligible to serve in leadership roles, whether that be in a locality scenario or statewide scenario. So, very delineated set of conditions to trigger a need to be compliant under this proposition, but also very clear delineation of what happens if the Department of Managed Healthcare finds that these healthcare entities are spending less than that 98% threshold requirement on direct patient care. The intent is to, of course, bring down the pure profit benefits to these healthcare entities for participation in this federal drug program, and to ensure that the consumers are at the benefit of these discount programs, that consumers are benefiting from accessible, high quality services that presumably these nonprofits are currently not focusing their efforts on. So that is Proposition 34 in a nutshell, and I'll see you in part 3 for Proposition 36.